Well, two sons, two fathers, two businesses, and one question I don't think I'm going to forget. What does my success look like from my children's seat? Guys, welcome back to Lyfe by the Horns. In the span of 1 week, I came across two stories from two sons talking about their fathers. Both fathers were entrepreneurs. Both spent years building businesses. Both, by most traditional definitions, were successful. But their sons weren't online bragging about what dad built. One was trying to decide whether he even wanted to take over the family business. The other said something much harder. My father ruined his life for his business. And man, that one definitely got to me. Because Nick and I are both fathers. We're both ambitious. We're both builders. We believe in hard work. We believe in providing. We believe in creating opportunities for our kids and ones that they may never have had otherwise. And entrepreneurs like us love talking about legacy, generational wealth, something or building something that lives outside of us or beyond us, giving our children a head start. But there's a question underneath all of that that I don't think we ask nearly enough. What does our success look like from our child's seat? Because we can tell ourselves we're doing all of this for our families while our families are quietly experiencing the cost of it. And what if we spend 30 years building something for our children only to discover the life they watched us live made them want nothing to do with it? So today isn't me interviewing Nick. We both get to be put in the chair because we're both living that tension right now. Building, leading, providing, being husbands, being fathers, trying to follow God, trying to figure out when sacrifice is necessary and when sacrifice is just the story ambitious people tell themselves to justify an unhealthy life. I don't want our kids to simply inherit what we built. I want to ask whether we're building lives worth inheriting. Nick, let's get uncomfortable, brother. How are you today?
I'm good, man. And telling me I'm going to get uncomfortable. It's like, all right, let's get into it.
Well, man, I just figured we've had so many great conversations, over the years, man, about, God and leadership and, all of these great things. But I think the one thing that we haven't really dove in with real depth is, man, what is that impact on our kids? What do they see? How do they experience us when we're doing all this stuff? So I just figured it'd be a great topic for today. So Nick, when you hear those two sons' stories, forget about being a business owner for a second. As a father, what hits you harder?
There's an idea, and I think I've told you this before, and it kind of plays into this that I've been wrestling with for a while, because there's all forms of guilt. I have husband guilt because I don't feel I'm present enough sometimes for my wife. I have dad guilt because I still feel that I'm a developing father. I'm not as emotionally mature as I should be. I don't always make the right decisions. And the type of human being that I am, I tend to focus more on what I missed versus what I did well, right? The wins are very fleeting to me. So the idea that I've been wrestling with is I don't have regrets, but I feel regret. And this plays directly into it because, I do want to create generational wealth for my children. I do want there to be some form of cushion to where no matter what they decide to do with their lives, there is that fallback safety net. But I would also hate myself if I made it to the end or I'm living the last 10 years of my life and my kids make their life decisions to do the complete opposite thing that I did because they saw how miserable I was. I would never want that for my kids. And it's a balancing act. So having the second child want nothing to do with the business, not from hey, that's just not my calling, it's not my purpose, but I watched my dad ruin his life for the business. That would be a huge fumble for me. Huge. So definitely don't want to put myself in that position. But I mean, the same thing for you, right? You've got Amanda, you got William, you got your bonus children. Like you're a builder, you've got your hands in a million different things, right? And you say you're building it for your family. Right. It's what we all say, because I think internally it makes us feel a certain way. Like outside of like the noble answer that we all give, like how much of your ambition is genuinely providing for them And how much of it do you think it's you just needing to prove something or to feel significant or something else?
Yeah. I would say probably for the first decade or so in my career, man, it was all for me. I would definitely say or parrot what everybody else says, which is, yeah, I'm doing this for my family. I want to provide a better or higher quality of life for them, or the things that I didn't have and all that shit that everybody says. But, the reality was, and I'm sure you've experienced this sometimes too, my wife had to remind me that I still loved you when you didn't have shit. Some of our best memories were when we were freaking going to Coinstar, man, to try to figure out how to get fucking groceries on the table. And although those moments didn't feel great, and I definitely didn't feel significant at the time, like we definitely we figured it out. And we were honestly more connected, during some of those earlier seasons because I didn't have all the distractions and all the other things. And then I got into a season where, man, building, it started to feel a little easier. And then more opportunities and stuff were coming my way. And I literally just kept leaning into this idea that, I'm doing it for them because then we can do more of this and then she can have more of that. And I'll never forget some of the fights that we had where it was like, take the fucking cars away, take the fucking house, fuck the vacations. Like, we don't even get to experience you. And then I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, there was a business opportunity that came up and I said no to it right out the gate. But then immediately my mind gravitated toward, if this goes well, can I build the kingdom faster? And it wasn't the kingdom that I was, stewarding for God and all that kind. It was my kingdom. And so I said yes, and I took the opportunity on. And I'll never forget, at the very beginning, my wife said, we just got to a point where we got your weekends back. And this is a business that is heavily reliant on weekends and holidays. Are you sure this is the best move? And I said, just give it a couple of years and I'll build the team and all the stuff. And then we can go and life will look a lot different. We'll finally have made it. And for those that don't know the story, it didn't work out. And it was hell. And not only was it hell, the season that followed was even more terrifyingly miserable because all of a sudden, everything that made me feel fulfilled, which was some level of significance, was now all going away. And I was struggling with, am I the man? Am I the provider? Am I these things that I'm supposed to be? Or I thought I was supposed to be. But fast forward to today, we had some conversations, a couple of weekends ago, man, and we were talking about numbers and goals and these kind of things. And I couldn't even answer, your question, which was, what is that number? And it was because, in this moment, I'm like, man, this feels like enough. I actually, for the first time in forever, and I hate this word, but feel some level of balance. I get to go stand at the bus stop with my son every morning. We can just say fuck it in the afternoon and go to the beach should we want to. I just have a lot more latitude in my life to experience them and them get to experience me. And so as new things have come up in my life, the bigger question is this going to take from that? And if so, how long?
So if it's any amount of time, is that too much?
No. I mean, I think there's something to also emulate and show our children that there are going to be seasons of hard work and where not everything is going to be perfectly balanced, especially in these, I would say earlier years of our life, even though we're middle-aged at this point. But, and I'm not going to say a name, but you had shared a story one time that was really interesting to me about a gentleman that you were a part of his coaching network. And one of the guys that he coaches this massive team, dude's a billionaire and then some, just wanted to go fishing. And then he made, 5 excuses as to why he couldn't, because the business needed this and needed that. And he's got this monstrous team. And it's like, well, why couldn't you just go do that? And that's what I don't want to get to in any capacity is, getting later in my life and having the grandkids and all those things. And the business is still taking so much of my time. So to answer your question, am I willing to expend more time on a business or businesses for a period? Absolutely, because there's always going to be a need. But it is going to have to be something that is finite and defined.
Yeah, but, and I'll just challenge the point, right? You may not have the number and you may be able to say by your own admission right now that right now everything feels good and this is enough, but you're still opening a door to an opportunity to where you are going to sacrifice time.
100%.
So if right now enough was actually enough, the doors would all be closed.
Yeah. Well,
and I think that's something that you and I will struggle with from now until forever. Because even though it is enough, just a little more won't hurt.
Yeah. Well, I look at it a little bit differently, and it's this, that, businesses have life cycles.
Mhm.
And just because the business is enough right now does not mean that it is sustainable, and it will continue to be like this if work does not go into it. And industries have life cycles. One of the industries that I'm been heavily a part of now for 6 years is going to see some massive disruption. It already is starting to see it. And so as I learn, adapt, and mold inside of that space to either do something that is future pacing, that will take more of my time. If I decide that I want to go something completely different, that will take more of my time. But the other thing that I've really been looking at is not so much how can I get inside of other things that take more of my time? How can I build a team around me that has a skill set that I necessarily don't have or is better than me in one area, and also leverage those amazing A players so that I still have my time, they're still rewarded, and we're still on the same page, rowing in the same direction.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, man,
the number conversation that we had, I've been doing a lot of thinking about that as well to try to find out why it was what it was. Well, we can follow up on that one later. I just want to throw it at you.
Yeah. No, I hear you, man. The number conversation's fun too, because as you know, man, the goalpost moves if you don't have some clarity around the why.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a bad thing either. And I think that clarity is what really matters there.
I agree.
Because if we really understand the why, then it's easier to be okay for a season to kind of settle into that versus just go to the next things. So, Nick, if your kids inherited your calendar tomorrow, would you be proud of the life you gave them?
I would be proud of the freedom that I gave them to choose what they want to do when they want to do it. And I would hope that they make better choices than I do. That's the best way I can put it. Cause you know me, I'm a core 4 guy. So there is time on my calendar for faith. There's time on my calendar for my fitness and my health. There's time on my calendar for my family. And the rest of the time goes into work. And I have the freedom to choose those things because of the skill set that I've developed and the network that I've developed and the players that I have around me. I just often choose wrong. And instead of choosing ways to allocate more time for my family and choosing ways to allocate more time for my faith and choosing ways to allocate more time to being in service. And I do those things sometimes. My auto response is to choose more ways to increase our financial stability and our financial safety. So the fact that they have a calendar that they get to choose how to set up, I would be extremely grateful for that thing, the network that I have and the people that I know and who I have surrounded myself from a moral and ethical value standpoint, I'm extremely happy with. I would just want them to choose to be fulfilled instead of drawing fulfillment from outside sources and accomplishments more so than I do. So same question back to you though, buddy. Would you want your children living your current calendar? And then I'll add to that because your current calendar, you already said you're happy with. We'll say 1 year ago's calendar, then you can do this year's calendar.
Yeah. I think honestly it would be better to go back 2 years. 2 years ago, no. Because my calendar was the opposite of yours. I mean, you mentioned the core 4. My calendar had one core quadrant, which was work. The only other quadrant that may have existed was fitness. And it was second fiddle to work. And it was like, okay, when can I actually go to the gym? Well, the 5 a.m. club was the only thing that made sense. And for some people, that may be your jam. Fuck that. Like there was no fuel in the tank. I mean, and then you go from waking up to just blasting your body with fucking pre-workout and everything so you can actually get something halfway decent in and your nervous system goes completely haywire. And so I made it work, but no, I would think if my kids inherited that calendar, they would go, man, the only important thing to this guy was fucking work. There was no scheduled family time. There was no scheduled anything except for work. And even in work, people hated my calendar because they were like, man, we can't spend any time with you unless we pencil it into your calendar.
Have you ever just sat back and wondered how the fuck we got here?
Yeah, because we parrot all these other quote unquote successful people, and what they say, and it's like, oh man, well if we listen to the 5 things that they say about how to be successful, then we may be able to actually make it. But it's like, make it according to who? There's folks out there that make $50,000 a year that go to all their kids' games that don't have any of the stresses that we have. And then sometimes you go, man, is that more successful? And again, according to who? And then you've got other folks like I know, Nick, you probably feel the same way. I don't remember the last time a shift was over in my life and it was like, all right, that's done. Now I can check into this other mode. I mean, at this point, it's like, okay, the day is done-ish, but if the phone rings and it's some sort of emergency, like, I mean, there's, an obligation and a pull to take care of it. So, the second part of your question, would they like my calendar today? Yeah, I think my son would think it's awesome. He's like, oh man, you get to go jump on a podcast and, have these conversations with people. And like, he would probably think that I just like work on my computer and do bullshit all day, which is what he loves to do as a kid. Like he's a gamer and all these things. So he's like, man, okay, so you wait a minute. You have to post to social media and that helps your business. You get to talk to cool people like Nick on a podcast and that's good to get your message out. Then you have some meetings with some folks to talk about networking and strategy. And then you have some sales calls. He may not like the sales call side of things, but other than that, then he would say, man, your day is about as long as my school day. And then we get to hang out, Dad. I'm like, yeah, man. So this year is much better than 2 years ago.
Well, yeah, and I'm glad that you said that the 5 a.m. club is bullshit, because I remember you trying to convince me that that was the most optimal thing in the world. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. You're like, oh yeah, this is great. It does this. It does this. I'm like, it does none of that shit. Like, you're tired. You shouldn't be doing what you're doing to your central nervous system right now. Stop it.
I love my 3 p.m. workouts because I've got plenty of time to, actually get some fuel in my system and I can definitely feel the difference. So, but man, Nick, I don't want this to become some bullshit anti-work conversation, because I think that's where some people could lean into this, because building something meaningful does require a level of sacrifice. And there are seasons where business or businesses need a lot more of us. The family may even understand that. How do you distinguish between a necessary season of sacrifice from an unhealthy lifestyle you've simply gotten really good at justifying?
In watching other successful leaders move, I don't think, and this is going to be very different than what I usually say, the only reason that there is sacrifice involved is because we want to move faster. I've watched people become extremely successful at a different pace because they weren't in a hurry to get to the success, so the sacrifice was never there. There may have been a day or two, and there is hard work, but they were aligned the entire time. Whereas you take someone like me, and I'll use myself as an example. I spent, my 20s after my sister died destroying my life. And then at 31, 32 years old, I got my head out of my ass. And I've spent the last 10 years working 7 days a week, not because the sacrifice was necessary. It's because I deemed it necessary because I wanted to catch up. I wanted to get to a certain level of success and be around a certain type of peer by a certain age. I had a time frame. Versus if I would have stayed on track and paced myself, I would have been exponentially further than I am now without that sense of urgency and feeling like I'm going to have a heart attack every single day. So do I feel that there are necessary seasons of sacrifice? If you were trying to go faster, yes. And if you want to build something that's outrageous, yes. But that's your perception and that is your decision. So I don't know if necessary is the right word. I do think that there are options for them. And if you choose them to go a certain path, then yeah, but I also don't think that that there's a justification for having an unhealthy lifestyle. It's not a justification. It's a bad choice. It's a trade, right? There's a price for everything. There's a price for everything. There's a price for the $25 Walmart shoes, and then there's a price for Air Jordans. You choose the price. They do the same damn thing. There's a price to drive a 1500, and there's a price to drive a TRX. Do the same thing and get me the same place. It's a choice. So the word necessary is dependent upon what outcome you're trying to create and the sense of urgency that you have, in my opinion.
Right. And there's this idea too that, every yes is a no to something else. And also the inverse of that is every no is also a yes to something. And, we've had a lot of conversation recently about just this idea of just because it is an opportunity, even if it is good, we can't necessarily say yes to all of them.
And well, you could, and you could live the life that I've lived for the last several years. And I'll bring this back to our wives. They're smarter than us. The fact that we have not listened to them and they stay around us just boggles my mind sometimes, because we pay people to stay around us and they can't stand us, right? Sometimes could you imagine how our wives feels like, damn, like I'm locked in here with him. I don't even get the paycheck, right? But there's a certain level of discernment that you and I specifically, I don't think that we can reach because of our blind ambition and some of the habitual things that we put in place and how we strengthen our neural pathways to do certain things. And I think that our wives have a certain level of intuition to tell us when it's the right time and when it's the right time to sacrifice. And it's up to us to kind of listen to those things. Because at the end of the day, the thing that, like, if I had all the businesses and I didn't have my wife, I would be miserable. But if I didn't have the businesses and I didn't have the money and my wife still loved me, we would figure it out and I'd be fine. And that's something that I tangle with a lot now, because there's an abundance of opportunities with such great people to do these great things. And I sit with my wife and I'm like, hey, here's the opportunity. Like, here's what this could turn into. And the only thing she wants is just to be in my presence. So you do enter seasons like that, but the sacrifice comes in when you make that decision, because losing a little bit of money is not necessarily a sacrifice. It's an unclaimed opportunity that isn't tangible because it's not there. It's an opportunity. Sitting with your wife and having coffee every single morning, or being around your kids at 4:00 every single afternoon, like, that's what you're sacrificing. You have FOMO on the other end. It's just fear of missing out, right? So it's a difficult conversation to have internally. There's a lot of introspection there when you break down, the words necessary and then sacrifice, because I don't think any of it's necessary. It's a choice. But we'll move on from that, because we could probably stay on that one for a really long time. But I mean, as entrepreneurs, man, like, we're masters at moving that finish line. Even some of the most successful people I've ever met, the answer is always just a little more, right? When we hit the revenue, when you hire the new person, when this launch is over, when the team finally builds this, I'll slow down. What's, by your own admission right now, everything feels good, but you're still pushing. So what's your finish line? And if you don't have one, how do you know you're building a future instead of continually postponing your life?
Man, those are deep. I don't have a finish line. I really don't. I think one of the things I've really been wrestling with, you hear a lot of entrepreneurs talk about this idea of your why. And I think most people's are superficial and bullshit. And I really had to lean into for myself, like, man, what is my why? What is the common denominator? Like, why do I build things the way that I do? Why do these projects and ideas feel so aligned? And it came down to 2 words, and it was human flourishment. And if what I'm doing is aligned with that, the why does feel way bigger than me, if that truly is the end goal. But the interesting paradox there is that if it is all about human flourishment, great opportunity, is it going to detract from my own human flourishment in my household, with my relationship with my children, my relationship with my wife? And if it's a very defined period and we're comfortable with that, okay, I can lean into this idea that maybe this is good for a period of time. I think the other interesting thing with, like, this finish line and the idea that the goalpost moves is that a lot of us, and even by God's design, if you look at everything around us, there's seasons of expansion and seasons of contraction. If you look at, the industry that you're in, Nick, or one of the industries that you're in, when you go to the gym, when you go to the gym and you kill yourself, when are you actually growing in recovery, in rest? When you look at, trees and foliage and all this shit around us, they, for the most part, unless you live in Florida like me, there's a dormant season. And then they go back into the spring and summer and they grow. Most of us have not taken the time to actually identify a goal, get to the goal, and then sit there with it for a moment and experience it and the win and be proud of it. And then identify, hey, is this next goal? Is this just some weird habitual chronic need of mine to continue to grow shit for just the sake of growing it? Or, is it something bigger than that? I don't have some finite number that I'm trying to get to. I don't have some necessary end goal, because I think as things that, grow and contract, there's also this idea that, we evolve and things change. And so I'm open to those things, but it always just comes back to this idea that, is it in alignment with human flourishment? And is it going to help my family flourish beyond just dollars in a bank account and experiences? And so, if it requires a lot more of me, how much longer is that going to be? I mean, you sat in a conversation with me a couple of months back, with a different opportunity. And it was the first time me and this gentleman were really talking about this opportunity. And I was very clear. I can help you do this, but you are only getting 5 to 10 hours of me a week. The outcomes will be great, but I'm not willing to give any more of that than that. And the instant response that I got was, well, we would want you to live here and do X, Y, Z. And I just said, no. A, it didn't make any sense to me. And then B, I'm like, I'm not willing to give up what I've worked so fucking hard to create just so I can have a little bit of more. More what?
I like that. But again, it just comes down to where you're at. And the purpose of human flourishment, I'll use Alex Hormozy here. You're going to die. In 3 generations, nobody's going to remember your name or that you existed. Period. So with the human flourishment, I'm at the same thing. The why feels good when I say that I'm doing it for the greater good. I am in an industry where the decisions that I make for the people that I help will change their lives. But every time I take on another client and every time I overextend myself for the flourishment of others, it is still a detraction from the flourish of the ones that I'm responsible for. And I don't know if I want to do that. I don't work at home anymore because I don't want my kids coming up and knocking on the door and I have to look at them and say, Daddy's working. I will stay out of the house until I am done working so that I can come home. So that as soon as I come home, Dad, can I spend time with you? Yes. I never want them to see me ever again choose work, even if it's during the work hours instead of them. I don't want to make those determinations anymore. Right. So regardless of what the why is, because, my why, I want to take over my dad's responsibility, my dad's role. He's the patriarch. I want to have enough income and resources to where I can solve problems immediately for all of my family. One of my sisters reached out to me and she's going through a tough time. It would be great to just walk over and be like, here's $25,000. Wipe out the medical bills, wipe out the credit card debt. Here's the money for your son's medication. Done. I would love those things. I am not there yet. Those are some of the things that drive me. But at the same time, if that's going to cost me the same amount of time that it cost me from Knox, from 3 years old to 7, and Atlee from 1 year old to 5, I'm not doing that with Aurora. I love humanity. I do. But I am responsible to and for them first. If I can be responsible to and for them and then help humanity, as much as people are going to call me a selfish prick for saying that, that's going to come second. So my purpose, my why, and my number have changed because the number has to be attainable if and only if my kids come first and my wife come first. Humans can flourish after my wife and my kids.
No, I love that. And I'm glad you said that too, because, the reality in my own world is the same. It can't be that everybody else is way more important than what's in my own household, because, man, what a fucking legacy would you leave when everyone's like, man, your dad was so amazing, the impact that he made on the world. And the kids are like, wait a minute, my dad was a fucking asshole. Everybody was more important to him than the people that he actually brought to this earth. And so, and that's something that I hugely lean into. So, Nick, when we talk constantly, or we hear a lot of other people talk about legacy and this idea of generational wealth, but our children inherit far more than those assets. They inherit a lot of our patterns. And I see this in my own life. It's like, man, I didn't want to do these things that my dad did, and then you hear yourself saying the things that they said and doing the things that they do, and it's kind of ironic. But what are your kids learning from the way you live right now that you desperately hope they do carry forward?
The relationship that I have with their mother, I think, is probably one of the most important things. The choices that I make to be of service to other people without expectations of return, I think, is the next thing. And then that it's okay to make mistakes as long as you heal them right after. Those are some of the main things that were not taught to me. And again, my parents are great parents. And I always compare my parents to where their parents were to see what type of progressions. Now, I don't hold things against my parents because I know their parents. And my parents did exceptionally well given the skill set that they were left with. Like my mom and my dad are freaking awesome. But I need to build upon those things. So those are the things, like having the foundation in faith, right? Understanding that you're fallible, but it's okay to be fallible as long as you go back and you heal. It's not okay to just hurt and walk away from it. You have to be of service. And the woman or man that you choose to be in your life will either make or break you, and that relationship determines how the household is run and how your life will be. Conversely, there's probably some other things that I hope they don't take with them as well.
Well, that was my follow-up. Is there something that they're seeing in you that you hope ends with you?
I hope they're more present than I am. To quote Elon Musk, and I'm not saying I'm Elon Musk because I'm absolutely not, but my mind is a storm. I don't like being in here. It is the worst neighborhood in the world sometimes, and I'm locked in, and I don't know how to get out of it. The amount of shame, regret I feel, the flashbacks, the future pacing worries, all of those things always detract from me being able to just sit down and exhale. And I don't want that for anybody, especially not my kids. I want them, that has to end with me. It has to. There will never be a day that I would want Knox worrying about how he's going to provide or if something's going to happen to his kids. And I don't want him to live a life where he has to live with the amount of, I don't have regrets because it brought me where I am, but I do feel regretful and I do feel shame because regardless of the pathway that it took me to become the man I am, it still hurts. I want that to end. I want such resounding faith to be built up in my kids that they know that even if everything is not okay, it will be okay. That they know that they're loved. They know that dad loves them, mom loves them, Jesus loves them, and that, life is good. And they can just sit and appreciate their accomplishments. They can sit and be proud of themselves. They can sit and know that they're enough regardless of what any worldly standard is. I have none of those things. And those are all the things that I want to end. And I know you've got some of those too, man.
Yeah.
So what part of you would you be incredibly proud to see show up in your children?
It's funny.
I'm going to take one away from you though.
Yeah.
Because I can't mention work ethic.
No. It's funny because we chatted yesterday offline just with some voice notes about this idea of a spiritual mirror. And there's so much of what you say that I'm like, yeah, I'm in 100% alignment with that. What things would I want them to emulate? Very much so my relationship with Amanda, but my relationship with their mother now, not what it was. Everything for my life for probably a 7 to 10 year period I was the most important thing. And everything else was next to that, which is a terrible thing to look back on and see. Because I'm like, man, they got to experience that for a period of time. So what I would really love them, to also take from that interesting journey and carry with them is that even if you're in a season that you're not proud of, you can evolve and you can change. And you can turn into the good father, the good husband, the good spouse, those kinds of things. Other thing that I would just love to see them do is just follow their ambition and their heart, man. I think a lot of times, most people just listen to the world and what the world tells them to do. And I did that for many, many seasons. And there's a lot of good that came from it. But, also just, being able to listen to your heart and your intuition and just fucking go after it. And I hope those are some things that they do. Some things that would scare me, very similar to yourself. I love that you said, a neighborhood that you wouldn't want anybody in. I think about that storm too. What I wouldn't want them to carry on is very deep isolation where, you have this lone wolf mentality and fuck everybody, I'll figure it all out. There's a beautiful thing when you have community and people that you know and love and being able to say, man, I'm needing some help right now. versus what I used to do. And you and I both know, how those stories unfold. When it's way too noisy in our head, we generally lean into things that we shouldn't to quiet that noise. And mine was alcohol. And that was, that terrible season that my wife and I are in. Like I was the most important thing. Alcohol was the next most important thing because it helped create some sort of emotional stability, I thought, in my life because it just quietened things, but it was an amplifier. So heaven forbid something went wrong. And then I was just full asshole mode. So I hope that they realize that I need to lean into a relationship with God. I need to be vulnerable. I need to not self-isolate. And, they carry their life forward from there. I hope they really are more mindful in remembering this season of my life versus what they saw for so many years. So
Pray.
Amen, brother. Well, man, let's make this even harder. If one of your children grew up and became exactly like you, so we'll use Knox, man. Same ambition, same relationship with work, same marriage patterns, same relationship with God, same habits, same strengths, same wounds. Would you consider that a win?
If he has the same wounds, I failed, period. The things that caused the wounds, it's my job to protect him from. I don't mind the rest of them. If he has my ambition, he has my drive, he has the same marriage patterns, the same relationship with work, because that'll evolve over time. The same relationship with God, relationships evolve over time. My habits, my strengths, those are good things. But if I didn't protect my son from the world and he has to feel the things that I feel, it doesn't matter what I gave him, I failed. That is my biggest fear. I have two. One was a question that was posed to me. And the question was, could God ever do anything to you that would make you turn your back on him? And I could only think of one thing. And that's one of my kids dying. And I wrestle with that a lot. And then the other one is one of my kids being exactly like me. But I meant from a deficiency standpoint and feeling empty and hollow all of the time. And filling that empty, hollow void with everything other than God and love. So no, I wouldn't consider it a win. And I don't care what they can do for the world. Because I can do a lot. If he has the same wounds, I failed. And that is very hard to say, and I don't even like thinking about it. The shit that I've gone through by my own causing, I would not wish on anybody. And thinking about Knox and how sweet and genuine that kid is, having me not protecting him from that, absolutely not. That's not a win. So, and I think you'd probably mirror that.
100%. Even to your point, whether it be William or Alex or Liliana, how kind-hearted and amazing humans they are. Anytime I've seen an inkling of me in them, it's terrifying. And when I say an inkling of me, the not so good traits, and it immediately goes into this, course correction. Let's get curious and try to understand why we're doing this. Because man, I'm like, when I look back, and I used to joke and say I was going to write a book called Burnt Bridges, the trials and tribulations of my life. And it used to be funny in my 20s about all the crazy, dumb shit I did and the people I hurt and everything else. And now I look back and I'm like, man, I need to write like 100. Well, I appreciate your candor.
It's 100 for 2023.
Yeah, it sounds relatively accurate.
But yeah, I know, right? It's almost like I know you. So let's say you spend decades building something incredible. You create wealth, companies, opportunities. And then one of your children looks at you and says, Dad, I'm proud of you. I respect what you built. Right? I don't want any of it. Could you genuinely celebrate that, or would a part of you feel like their rejection of the business is a rejection of you?
Yeah, I think, if anyone's being honest with that question, I think, we think we're building this thing for legacy and for them. If they say, I don't want anything to do with it, I think the first thought is, or the interpretation or meaning we put behind that is, what did I do wrong? What does this mean about me? It's a very egocentric thing. But it's also very natural. So I think I would go there. I would probably be very introspective, but also very curious with them, as to why. But at the end of the day, and you mentioned this earlier, I don't necessarily care what their ambitions are or what they want to do, as long as it's good. But I'm here to support them. So I'm not necessarily building something that, man, I've got these big hopes and dreams that they pick up where I left off and they continue it, make it, bigger, faster, stronger. It's that, I'm creating something that creates enough safety and security around them so that they can go after and do whatever it is that they want to do, versus how a lot of people are brought up. And it's like, man, I have this gift and I would love to do this thing, but I don't have the financial resources to do it. I don't have the backing. I don't have whatever it may be. And if there's a a very dear friend of mine, his younger brother did what all of us, or what most of us do. He graduates high school, he goes to college, and he spent one semester there. And he was like, Dad, this is not for me. And he was like, okay, well, what is for you? And he's like, I don't know, but I think I want to get into real estate. And here's my plan. And so his dad was like, okay. And, his dad's an engineer. School's obviously a big part of that. And he was like, if this is what you want to do, I'll support you. And what I'm willing to do is, this investment in school will go towards this real estate business idea that you have. And I will be your 50-50 partner. Fast forward 15 years. I mean, this kid's building, and he's not even a kid anymore, but I mean, great net worth. I mean, dozens and dozens of rental properties under his belt. He's building new construction, small neighborhoods. He's, well esteemed in the real estate community in Atlanta. And I'm like, man, and when I look back, I'm like, how fucking cool is that for them to, have a good enough relationship where him say, Dad, this is not the path that I want to go on. And Dad says, I love and support you enough that I'm willing to go on this journey with you. And it's been a beautiful, beautiful thing to watch. So my goal would be that I do create that foundation, that safety, and those resources so that if William comes to me and says, Dad, I don't want to be a business owner. I don't want to do what you did, but I've got this other idea. Yeah, let's figure that out together.
What if he says he doesn't want to figure it out together?
That's okay too. And then I'll get really curious as to what the hell I did wrong. But I also know, man, so many of us, young adults, late teens, like we think we've got it figured out. And there's so many lessons, and my dad's been passed away for 17 years now. There's so many lessons my dad was trying to teach me when I was younger that I was just completely resistant to. And now that I'm older, I'm like, man, he was right in so many of those things. And I don't wish he would have applied more pressure because I would have been even more resistant to those things. But I think it would be a place where I'd have to get more curious about myself. Going back to this whole thing about legacy, was I spending more time on the business and these things where I didn't create a good enough relationship with him, where I was blindsided by that response of his. So anyway, well, Nick, there's a faith component here that I think we also need to confront. Entrepreneurs love spiritual language, or at least some of them do. God called me to build this. God gave me this opportunity. I'm stewarding my gifts. And maybe that's true, but can we become obsessed with building something for God that we neglect the people God actually entrusted us to?
100%. 100%, man. But depending on what I go through during any given week, my attitude towards this question may change a little bit, but there are less people working for God, claiming God, than are actually working for God, right? So yes, you have gifts. Yes, you're supposed to steward them. Yes, if you're entrusted with a little, you'll be entrusted with a lot, and you're supposed to use that abundance to create pathways and impact. But I think a lot of people claim it and they're full of shit, period. I've had instances of it this week where person's claiming God, claiming they've changed, claiming they've done all this stuff. This first second they get uncomfortable, they start down talking, showing anger and all these other things. It's like, there it is. I knew you were full of it. So I don't, in my experience, I haven't been around entrepreneurs that when they're in a business meeting, it's always, I'm building this for God. I'm building this for God. I'm building this for God. But if they're put under an interview or a microscope, it's, I'm building it for God. It's like they magically remember when they're asked. It's like, language is primitive. Right? I'll use Kevin Gates quotes. Right? The language is very primitive. I'll watch you. I'll watch your actions. And then it's the same thing for me. If I claim, which I do, that God has given me gifts and abilities and that I'm using them for the right reasons as much as I can, because I'm still human, I'm very fallible, and I fuck shit up all the time. I do. It's whatever. If I'm claiming that when an opportunity to actually help God's kingdom is thrust upon me, I should immediately say yes. And if I don't, I'm not building it for him. I'm building a moat and a castle for me to keep everybody else out. So to answer the question, yeah, I think that we get wrapped in those things. And if that is the case and you are not actually building for God because of the way God has the household set up, like a faith-led household, of course you're going to neglect the people that God entrusted to you. And that's not just your family. Those are the people inside of your business. That's your extended network. You're going to neglect all of those things because the only thing that's important to you is the money, the accolades, the people telling you that you're great. But you'll also get convicted of that and you'll feel it. Right?
Real talk. Most marketing problems aren't marketing problems. They're business problems wearing a marketing hat. Cute, but very expensive. Maybe you're getting traffic, but it's not converting. Maybe you're converting, but your average sale is too low. Maybe things are fine, but not scaling. That's usually a system issue, not a need a new ad issue. So here's the move. Let's hop on a short call, look at your business, and see what's really holding your growth back. No pressure, no pitch, just a fit check. If we can help, we'll tell you how. If we can't, we'll tell you that too. Tap learn more and grab a time.
How do you distinguish faithful stewardship from ambition dressed up as a calling?
Well, you know me relatively well. Everything in my life, for the most part, has been fast. Like, man, new idea, new thing, fast. And we've been having a lot of conversation over the last 8 months around this idea of discernment. And I've mentioned it several times since then, so it means it had an impact on my life. But when you had mentioned to me last December this idea of, praying and there's two people listening, and I balked and I'm like, no, it's God and it's me, man. There's no one else listening. Like, my wife's not there. And you're like, no, it's also the devil. And I was like, oh man, we kind of delve a little bit more into this idea of discernment. And then if it shows up really fast, it's probably not God. And we talked a little bit about human flourishment earlier and those kind of things. The first thing I look for is it in alignment with that? And then if I can check that box off, I'm a little bit excited. The second thing I look for is, can I put this on pause for a moment and really just pray on it and see if there's some things that show up in my life that say this is the faithful direction to go into or not. And so I've had, this year, some really grandiose ideas and some things that I've wanted to tackle. And literally with all of them, there's been my knee-jerk reaction, which is, foot on the gas, let's accelerate really quickly. And then immediately some pause that is followed. And whether that be somebody telling me to pause or whether it be me just going, man, something feels rushed or too fast. And from my previous experience, when it's fast, it's generally not good. And, as Miles would say, man, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And so I'm like, okay, well, I like this idea and I'm going to ideate on it. And could it come to life? Yes. But let's just pump the brakes a little bit. And there have been some things that I put on pause for a month or two and then just prayed and prayed and prayed and come back and said, no, I think this is definitely where I am supposed to go. But I'm also not going to go pedal to the metal like with everything else. If it truly is supposed to happen, then I'll continue to listen. And if this comes to fruition, fantastic. Versus me previously, no, man, every idea was a good idea. Let's do it. Let's move quickly. And, in the world of leadership or stewardship, that can be extremely reckless. And the reason that pause is so important to me too is that is when I allow some space in my life to actually listen to God. Versus when I'm moving fast and reckless, the only thing I'm listening to is what's in my head, which is generally not always correct.
I already told you, my mind is a neighborhood I don't want to be in, so I don't want to listen to what's going on in there. It's horrible.
Correct. So, man, let's finish with this. So 20 years from now, our kids are sitting around a table talking about us. Nobody talks about income or revenue. Nobody talks about businesses that we've exited. Nobody cares about how many employees we led. They're simply talking about what was it like being our child. Nick, what do you hope they say?
My dad's my best friend. That's it. Like, I want Knox to say my dad is my best friend. And I would want Atlee and Laura to say my dad taught me what the definition of a true man was. There's going to be some good stories and some bad stories. But the baseline, that's what I would like. What about you, buddy? Like, what do you hope yours say?
Yeah, I would hope they would say like, yeah, my dad built some really cool shit, but the reality was he was always there for me. He's always proud of me. He always made me feel loved. And no matter what was going on in my life, he would stop everything for me versus what most people do. Daddy's busy. I want to build really great humans that do amazing stuff in this world. But to your point, I want them to love our relationship so much that when they go out and spread their wings, they want to come home because they love the relationship that we have, not out of obligation for Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, man, let's jump into, our favorite part of the segment, rapid fire. Just first thing that comes to mind. What's more dangerous, financial failure or successful parents their children barely know?
Successful parents, their children barely know. All right, Dustin, what's one thing entrepreneurs call sacrifice that's sometimes actually just selfishness?
I think a lot of us say that we're building a business for our family, but ultimately we're doing it for ourselves and our own significance. So,
Big.
Nick, what's something your children should inherit from you that would never appear in your will?
Faith.
Finish this sentence. My kids don't need me to be blank.
A successful businessman.
And then last one, I'll know I built a successful life if my children someday say,
God loves me, my dad loves me, my mom loves me, and everything will always be okay even if it's not okay.
Yeah, amen to that, brother. Well, 2 sons, 2 fathers, 2 businesses, and one question I don't think I'm going to forget. What does my success look like from my children's seat? Because our kids aren't reading our P&Ls. They're reading us. They're watching how we treat their mother. They're watching what stress does to us. They're watching whether money controls our mood. They're watching whether we put the phone down, whether we rest without feeling guilty, whether we're physically in the room, but mentally somewhere else. And they're deciding consciously or unconsciously, is this the life that I want someday? So build, take risks, create wealth, employ people, pursue excellence, work your fucking ass off when the season requires it. But don't confuse providing for your family with sacrificing your family, because maybe generational wealth isn't enough. Maybe the real goal is generational wholeness. Wealth, faith, health, character, presence, a healthy marriage, a healthy relationship with work, and children secure enough in who they are that they don't have to become us to honor us. The goal isn't to build a business our children feel obligated to inherit. It's to build a life worth inheriting. Nick, brother, thanks for getting uncomfortable with me today. And for everybody listening, thanks for tuning in to Lyfe by the Horns.